maybe going to Cuba. I was thinking if you're going to go, maybe you could bring me something back. No, not cigars, no rum, no plantains. How about her?
I'm honored to stand here today alongside the New Jersey State Police, the New Jersey Attorney General's Office, and United States Marshal for the District of New Jersey to announce the addition of Joanne Chesimard to the FBI's most wanted terrorist list. While living openly and freely in Cuba, she continues to maintain and promote her terrorist ideology. Joanne Chesimard is a domestic terrorist who murdered a law enforcement officer execution style.
Chesimard executed State Trooper Werner Forster, then was granted asylum in Cuba. But she's just one of 80-plus American fugitives in Cuba. Murderers, hijackers, cop killers, including the scum who killed State Trooper Robert Rosenblum. See, unlike North Korea, Cuba is a jewel of the left because both adore Marxist thugs, those who failed at life but excel at taking it. Do you think that occurred to our president, or did he decide to normalize because, you know?
Because it's the right thing to do for the country. Plus, it's just fair and it's the right thing to do. It was ultimately the right thing to do.
I can persuade the American people that it's the right thing to do.
This is the right thing to do for our economy. And we do that because it's the right thing to do.
We are making these changes because it is the right thing to do.
See, he says that about everything. It's a sweet refrain, but one that fails to say why you reward a regime that torments people and harbors ghouls. Why not demand their return? Are you afraid to hurt feelings? But as with golf, Obama loves to play even as he loses. He's like a kid in a casino, mindlessly pulling on slot machine levers while mom and dad lose their shirt to the men in green holding the cigars. And as for those saying our commerce will bring an end to Cuba's charm, that's easy to say when you aren't living on scraps, turning tricks for coddled celebrities. Yep. Someone else's misery is never quaint. But maybe normalization will finally stop these celebrities from flying to pits like Cuba, only to be shown singing children and maggot-free bread. Propaganda tours for Reds gobble up gullible stars, because where there are commies, there are commie butt-kissers. Cuba treated Cubans poorly, not because it had to, but for belief. Che made them slay. The rule of thumb with totalitarians, the people under that thumb suffer. And its fans always find the thumb more appealing than the bodies underneath. So, KG, you're a prosecutor. Why can't America demand the return of a cop killer, or actually two?
Why can't they? I mean, out of the 80 criminals that Cuba is harboring, why don't they give us those two? I mean, I don't think this was such a stretch to be able to make this part of the negotiation and insist on it. Mm-hmm. Say this is like draw a red line, right? Yeah. We want these two back. I mean, certainly on the FBI most wanted list, this woman, Joanne Chesimard, why don't we have her back right now? Perhaps it's not too late. It can be, I think, utilized in the further ongoing negotiations with Cuba to say if you want to increase diplomatic relations, you want us to reduce these restrictions further, this is what we're going to insist on. And I think it's a good bargain and one that they should observe, especially now that you even have the Pope getting involved. The Pope was helpful, perhaps some say instrumental, in negotiating the release of Alan Gross. Hopefully he can ask for this too, because these crimes should not go unprosecuted.
You know, Bob, I would be more rah over this normalization if I didn't feel that President Obama thinks there's no merit in any of our previous oppositions, that our adversarial relationship was valid. I think he always thought that was a mistake.
Well, first of all, can I just say that not all the left is in love with Marxists, you said in your opening. I know why you do it. I know why you do it. The other thing about, Cuba should have given these people up, but we don't have any relationship. We have no extradition treaty with them. The other thing is that it was over 50 years ago when John Kennedy put sanctions on Cuba, and he directly linked those sanctions with their relations with Russia. With the USSR then. They no longer are supplying Cuba with the oil they need. Argentina is still trying to do that, but they're losing money. So right now, if there ever was a time to do this, it's when when Russia and Argentina have the lowest influence with Cuba. And I think it's the right thing to do. Venezuela, excuse me.
Right. That's basically what you're saying. And Eric, you know this more than anybody. They're only doing this because their only friend left is crumbling Venezuela. It's all about oil.
Right. Well, Russia and Venezuela, and
Iran.
You're right. It is.
Iran is a space.
Is all about. It is all about oil. But so your point is awesomely taken that these are some bad people that Cuba is harboring, but maybe, normalizing. Maybe the ongoing debate can happen. Maybe we can get those people back. Maybe we can prosecute those criminals for what they've done here. And I took a lot of heat for saying I like the idea of normalizing with Cuba, but it's 11 million new customers for our farming industry, our agribusiness. It's $358 million right now that they buy from us. It could be $3.5 billion easily. It could easily multiply by a tenfold. And we talked a little bit on Twitter on email, I think, last night, Greg, about, well, so what if there's a McDonald's there? So what if there's a KFC there? A lot of people are saying, oh, don't ruin Havana with KFC and McDonald's. But you know what? That'll help Cubans.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll have jobs.
Yeah. What about you, Dana? I was surprised that the Washington Post editorial board slammed the president over this. He called this an undeserved. They called this an undeserved bailout.
Yes, I wrote that down too.
Well, good for you.
Bailout.
You get a star.
Well, Jackson Deal and Fred Hyatt of the Washington Post editorial board, I think, are some of the strongest freedom fighters that we have in commentary today. So I wasn't that surprised with them. There are lots of mixed feelings about this. I am concerned with the economic argument by saying that it's going to help Americans, because what we really should be worried about is, are you going to help the Cubans? So if there is a McDonald's that opens up, let's say in the next 10 years, I hope that those people that end up working there get paid with dollars that tourists use rather than getting paid with pesos, which is what happens now. If you go to a hotel in Cuba right now, you would pay in dollars. They're all owned by the state. The state takes that money and they pay the workers in pesos, which are almost worthless.
Right.
So I think if we see any normalization in the future, that should be a precondition. And I think that Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, with his powerful position on the Foreign Relations Committee, will be able to help make that happen. The reforms will be very late in coming if we don't press on it. So I think that's why the Washington Post said that the president didn't do a very good job of getting a good deal here.
Can I say, Dana makes a great point, because we have incredible leverage and influence, especially with the way that we can really impact Cuba and the economy and some of the things Erica has touched on. We should use that leverage. We shouldn't be afraid to utilize it and put it on the table and demand that some of these changes come about, because then it's not just about dollars for the U.S., but it's about making a meaningful impact and standing for something. There should be preconditions. We can't just turn a blind eye for it and take the cash. Well, we have a larger, more global responsibility.
Can I make a point about the Washington Post? It has been very strong on the Cuban sanctions, going back to Ben Bradley and his relationship with Kennedy. One. Two, we have other countries, we have diplomatic relations that are harboring United States fugitives. Now, we don't close embassies down. In Russia, we don't do it in Saudi Arabia. They keep people who have broken the United States law. So, I mean, you can't have a double standard here.
I love
Besides Snowden, though? I don't know.
Yes, exactly. But also, that one of the favorite responses to somebody who would support President Obama's actions yesterday is that, well, there's hypocrisy in our policy, right? There's hypocrisy that we would have relations with China or Vietnam, but not with Cuba. Why don't we change that? But last week, when we were talking about the hypocrisy of being against enhanced interrogation techniques, but being willing to do drones, which kill people to smithereens, you couldn't talk about hypocrisy last week. But now, all of a sudden, we can talk about hypocrisy.
Well, it's apples and oranges, though. I mean, look, you're talking here about... Yes, it is.
Well, hypocrisy is hypocrisy.
Well, okay. If you want to put it under a rubric, fine. But
apples and apples.
There is... the fact of the matter is we do have countries that we have relationships with that are terrible human rights violators and have the United States... China, but I'm on the top. It is the top. It is the top.
But we still have...
why then hasn't... on the last two trips, it has been reported by the White House press corps that President Obama has not brought up human rights violations with China in the last two meetings. Why is that?
It's a terrible mistake on his part. I cannot believe he wouldn't. I mean, every president I know that went to China has raised...
What does he have to lose by bringing that up?
I have no idea. You've got...
Be on the record.
Well, remember his other refrain, this is not who we are anymore.
So can I add a little... human rights benefit to this deal?
Yes.
that will happen without any force. Without any force, we need to demand this, or we should be making sure that they get dollars instead of pesos. When you open up the way that the president has offered, you open up the banking system as well. Right now, you can't trade with Cuba. You can't say, we'll trade you dollars for pesos. It's off limits. You can't do that. As you allow that to happen, you can put a U.S. bank in Cuba. That'll immediately make the Cuban peso multiples stronger. That'll help the Cuban people immediately. Almost the exact opposite of what's going on in Russia. The Russian ruble is getting destroyed. It's really putting pressure on the Russian people. If you open up banking with Cuba, boy, you're going to just any Cuban that has a peso in their pocket will immediately have more pesos and more ability to buy stuff in Cuba.
That's true.
But we got to get something out of this country, or else they kind of win. Can we go to a montage of both sides, mixed feelings from everybody?
Fun. Okay.
Okay. Is that all right, KG?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little more taste of, free market and free ideas will, I think, encourage more demand for change from the Cuban people.
This is a president who wants to leave his mark by, quote unquote, improving relations with the worst regimes on earth, and that's what he wants to do.
But I think having diplomatic relations, as we have had with the Soviet Union, with Vietnam, and so many other places, we can produce positive change.
Wait till we sell Iran a nuclear bomb. Yes, I'm joking, but I'm trying to illustrate a point by using excessive exaggeration.
Yes, I love it.
What are you talking about? You weren't even listening.
I was laughing at Rush because Rush is like, why don't we sell Iran a nuclear bomb? He's like, I'm making a point by using exaggeration, of course, because there's somebody out there that's going to criticize and say, can you believe Rush just said this?
Yeah, somebody actually,
joke within a joke.
When I said arrest the Sony filmmakers, people actually thought I meant that. I was being ironic about Benghazi.
The fact that Charles Crowder was one of the smartest people I know would suggest that this is the worst human rights violation when you talk about North Korea. Give me a break. But leaving that aside, I don't understand here what the problem is with opening up and maybe having some change there. It's 90 miles off of our shore.
I will say that sanctions maybe haven't worked the way they should, but I think about the people that know how bad Cuba's been, and that's why President Obama has to address their concerns. He has to say, look, I know these guys were awful people, but we've got to deal with them. But we're going to get something out of them.
I think that's right. I think you should go there and you should say that. And by the way,
I don't trust him.
We didn't cover it today, but Eric, I'm glad you raised this. I think the biggest story in the world right now is the Russian economy crashing. I mean, that's bigger than this one.
No, but the people who are pushing back, some of the people who are pushing back are saying, well, we didn't demand human rights change out of Cuba before we made this deal. I'm telling you, the minute you open up a trade, let the currency trade against the dollar, you are going to help every poor Cuban on that island. 11 million people. Yes, will it help the oligarchs? Will it help the rich people? Will it help the people who stole land when Batista was thrown out? It'll help them, too, because, you know what? It helps everyone. But when you help them, you're also helping the average Cuban.
You didn't demand human rights out of China when Nixon went there.
I agree, Bob. I agree. I mean, look, it's hypocritical to say we need to continue to demand human rights corrections out of Cuba, but not demand the same thing out of China. China's the big bear. China's the one you don't want to mess around with. You don't want to tick off. So everyone's like, ooh, let's not tick off China. Apply the same standard.
Bob loves it.
Can I, Dan, I want to go to you on this. China. This is Ted Cruz. You're aware of who he is, correct?
Yes, I think
this is him.
Bob's friend.
Yeah, comparing the spy swap, and he calls them spies to something else. Take it away, Ted.
He's also doing something reminiscent of the Bo Bergdahl deal, where for Sergeant Bergdahl, he released 5 senior Taliban terrorists. In this instance, he's releasing 3 Cuban spies who were responsible for the murder of 4 American citizens for spying on U.S. military installations, including the Southern Command.
Is that a fair comparison?
Well, I think it's a logical one. I mean, why not? The president didn't do a lot to explain it. He didn't take any questions from the press yesterday. He just did basically an executive move. And I think that's interesting that every time recently, and let's just look at the 2 that Ted Cruz mentions, those concessions are basically to get to an end that President Obama wanted anyway.
Right.
So
that was a good point, but not if everyone was trying to take questions, seems to me, and educate people about this, it should have been yesterday. And he didn't take advantage of it, and I don't get it. I really don't get it. You're not going to get a whole lot of adversarial questions, right?
Not only that, why not take questions tomorrow, and also I would have said that the President of the United States, with the First Amendment, should have taken questions yesterday, because for anybody who got a chance to see that in Cuba, they would see, oh, you actually get to ask questions of your leaders in America. That would have been a useful thing to do.
Very good point.
Well, let's just hope that negotiations aren't finished. Let's hope this is the beginning.
They're not.
Well, that's the point. My point is, so we're saying
maybe that's why he didn't take questions.
Right. Maybe there's more ongoing things that they have.
Well, the Assistant Secretary of State is shepherding that, so it's ongoing.
All right, ahead. Celebrities.